The words hung in the air like poison, each syllable piercing my heart as my niece Bethany smiled at her soon-to-be in-laws. "This is Charlotte, our family maid. She's been with us forever." I stood there in my carefully chosen navy dress, the gold brooch that had belonged to my sister Bethany's mother pinned above my heart. The small wrapped gift in my hands suddenly felt heavy as lead. Has a loved one ever dismissed your role in their life? Have you experienced the pain of being reduced to something less than what you truly were? Share your story in the comments below. I'd love to know which city you're listening from and if anything like this has happened to you. My name is Charlotte Davis. I am 62 years old, and until that moment, I thought I knew what family meant. I was wrong. Bethany came into my life when she was just 4 years old. My younger sister Patricia and her husband died in a car accident, leaving their only child an orphan. There was never any question about what would happen next. I was single, financially stable as a high school English teacher, and I loved my niece as if she were my own. I postponed dating, declined a promotion to department head that would have required longer hours, and rearranged my entire life to give Bethany the love and stability she desperately needed. I sat through parent-teacher conferences, cheered at soccer games, helped with science projects, and held her through nightmares where she called out for parents she barely remembered. When Bethany graduated high school as valedictorian, I cried tears of pride. When she got a full scholarship to Northwestern University, I threw her a celebration party. When she met Robert, a handsome young investment banker from a wealthy family, I welcomed him with open arms, hosting dinners at my modest home and listening to their plans for the future. The wedding planning began 6 months ago. Bethany and Robert would marry at his parents' estate in Connecticut. I offered to help any way I could, though I knew my teacher's salary couldn't contribute much to what was clearly going to be an extravagant affair. "Don't worry about a thing, Aunt Charlotte," Bethany had told me. "Robert's parents are handling everything. Just show up and enjoy yourself." But as the wedding approached, I noticed subtle changes. Bethany stopped bringing Robert to our weekly dinners. When I called, she was always just heading into a meeting or about to meet with the wedding planner. The few times we did speak, she asked oddly pointed questions about my childhood, my relationship with her mother, my time working summer jobs as a teenager. Now I understood why. As Robert's mother, Catherine, stared at me with barely disguised disdain, Bethany continued her introduction. "Charlotte practically raised me after my parents died. She's been with our family for almost 30 years. The careful wording, the strategic omission of our relationship, the revision of our history to make me sound like a domestic employee rather than her only living relative who had sacrificed everything to raise her." "How? Dedicated?" Catherine replied, her eyes skimming over my modest dress. "We've had our housekeeper, Maria, for 20 years. It's so hard to find loyal help these days." I felt my face flush with humiliation as understanding dawned. Bethany had reinvented herself for Robert's wealthy family, and in her new narrative, she wasn't an orphan raised by a schoolteacher aunt. She was from old money with household staff that had served the family for generations. I was just a prop in her carefully constructed lie. "Actually," I said, finding my voice at last, "I'm Bethany's aunt, her mother's sister. I raised her after my sister and brother-in-law died." The silence that followed was deafening. Catherine's eyebrows shot up, and she turned to look at her son, who seemed equally surprised. Bethany's face drained of color. "Aunt Charlotte," she said through clenched teeth, grabbing my elbow and steering me away from the group. "Can we talk privately?" She pulled me into a small anteroom off the main hallway of the mansion. "What are you doing?" she hissed once the door closed behind us. "What am I doing?" I repeated, incredulous. "Bethany, you just introduced me as the maid." "I never used the word maid," she countered, as if that technicality somehow made it better. "You called me the help," I said, my voice breaking slightly, "after everything we've been through together." Bethany ran a hand through her perfectly styled hair, careful not to disrupt it. "You don't understand. Robert's family, they're different from us. They value lineage, connections. They wouldn't understand someone like you." "Someone like me?" The words felt like a slap. "You know what I mean," she said impatiently. "A single woman who taught high school for 40 years, who lives in the same small house in the suburbs, who wears the same clothes until they're threadbare." Each description was factually accurate but twisted to sound pathetic rather than sensible or admirable. "Is that how you see me?" I asked quietly. "As someone to be ashamed of?" I'm not ashamed, she insisted, though her actions proved otherwise. I'm just adapting to my new life. Robert's family has expectations. His mother has been introducing me to all the right people, helping me fit in. By erasing who you really are? By erasing me? Bethany glanced at her diamond watch, a recent gift from Robert that cost more than my car. Look, I need to get back to the dinner. Can you just go with it for tonight? We can talk more after the wedding. I stood there, stunned by her request. She wanted me to participate in my own erasure, to pretend I was someone who had cleaned her toilets rather than someone who had held her through nightmares and sat up with her when she was sick. Bethany, I said, my heart breaking with each word. I have never been more disappointed in my life. Her face hardened. Fine, if you can't do this one simple thing for me after everything I've done for you. Everything you've done for me? I interrupted, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. What exactly have you done for me, Bethany? Enlighten me. I let you be part of my life, she snapped. I call you every week. I come to your boring little house for dinner. I listen to stories about your students that I don't care about. Do you know what it's been like? Having no real family? Just you? Her words cut deeper than any knife could have. Just you. As if the love I'd given her, the life I'd built for her, amounted to nothing. I see, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded despite the earthquake happening in my heart. Well, I won't burden you with my presence any longer. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small velvet box, which I placed on the side table. This was your mother's. My sister wanted you to have it on your wedding day. It's not a designer brand, and it didn't cost thousands of dollars, so I understand if it doesn't fit with your new image, but it's the only thing I have left to give you. I turned to leave, but Bethany's voice stopped me. If you walk out now, don't expect to be welcome at the wedding. I paused, my hand on the doorknob. I wouldn't dream of embarrassing you by attending. After all, what would the caterers think if you were friendly with the help? The rehearsal dinner continued without me. I drove back to my boring little house in the suburbs, the home where I had raised Bethany, where every room held memories of her growing up. I sat in her old bedroom, which I'd kept largely unchanged since she left for college, and allowed myself to cry. The next morning, I received a text from Bethany. I hope you've reconsidered your dramatic exit. The ceremony is at 4. Please don't make a scene. I didn't respond. Instead, I did something I had been considering for months but had hesitated to pursue out of concern for how it might affect Bethany. I called my lawyer, James, who had been a friend since we dated briefly in college. It's time, I told him. I want to move forward with the house sale. Are you sure, Charlotte? He asked. This is a big step. I'm sure, I replied. It's long overdue. What Bethany didn't know, what I had been waiting for the right moment to tell her, was that my boring little house sat on 3 acres of prime real estate that a developer had been trying to purchase for years. The land had belonged to my grandparents originally, and while the house itself was modest, the property value had skyrocketed as the suburbs expanded around it. I had received an offer of $1.8 million 6 months ago. I had planned to use part of the money to buy a smaller place for myself and give the rest to Bethany as a wedding gift, a nest egg to start her married life, free from financial worries. Now, I had different plans. The day of Bethany's wedding, while she was walking down the aisle at Robert's family estate, I was signing papers in James's office, finalizing the sale of my property. What will you do with the proceeds? James asked after the developer's representative left. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. I'm taking a year to travel, something I've always wanted to do but put off for Bethany's sake. After that, I'm establishing a scholarship fund for students who have lost parents, and the rest will fund my retirement. Nothing for Bethany? He asked carefully. She made it clear she wants nothing from me, I replied. I'm respecting her wishes. 2 weeks later, as I was packing for my trip starting with a month in Italy, something I'd dreamed about since college, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Bethany standing there, looking less polished than at the rehearsal dinner but still wearing designer clothes that probably cost more than my monthly salary. We need to talk, she said, brushing past me into the house without waiting for an invitation. I closed the door and followed her to the living room, where she was already seated on the couch, examining her manicure. Congratulations on your marriage, I said, remaining standing. I hear the wedding was lovely. It was, she replied dismissively. Robert's mother hired the best of everything. She looked up at me. You should have been there." "As what? The family maid?" She had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "About that. I was under a lot of pressure. Catherine was asking all these questions about my family background, and I panicked. I'm sorry if your feelings were hurt." "If my feelings were hurt," I repeated. The non-apology was so transparent it was almost laughable. "Anyway," she continued, glancing around the living room, "that's not why I'm here. Robert and I have been talking about our future, about starting a family eventually. This house has so much space, and with the large yard." She trailed off, looking at me expectantly. I waited, wanting her to actually articulate what she was asking. "So," she finally continued, "we thought maybe you could sign the house over to us, as a wedding gift. You could move into something smaller, maybe one of those senior apartments with activities and people your age. It would be better for you anyway." I stared at her, momentarily speechless. Not only was she not apologizing for her treatment of me, but she was here to ask for my house, the house where I had raised her, which she had just recently called boring and beneath her. "The house isn't available," I said simply. "What do you mean, not available? You live here alone. It's too big for one person, and I grew up here. I have more right to it than you do." "I sold it," I told her, watching her expression change from entitlement to shock. "The developer broke ground yesterday." "You what?" she screeched, jumping to her feet. "How could you sell my childhood home without even talking to me?" "The same way you could introduce me as the help without talking to me first, I suppose." She paced the living room, agitated. "This is unbelievable. That developer has been trying to buy this place for years. How much did you get for it?" Of course, that would be her first question. Not what my plans were or where I would live, but how much money was involved. "Enough," I replied. "Well, obviously part of it will come to me," she said, as if stating an obvious fact. "I'm your only family, and Robert and I could use it for a down payment on a place in his parents' neighborhood." I studied the young woman before me, trying to see any trace of the child I had loved so fiercely, the teenager I had stayed up late with discussing books and dreams, the young woman I had been so proud to see graduate from college. She was physically the same person, but something essential had changed, or perhaps had always been there, hidden beneath the surface. "No, Bethany," I said firmly. "The money is mine, and I've already allocated it." "To what?" she demanded. "Some is going toward my retirement, some to travel, and a significant portion to establish a scholarship for orphan children." Her face contorted with anger. "You'd rather give money to strangers than to your own family after everything we've been through?" "According to you, I'm not family," I reminded her. "I'm the help. And you've made it abundantly clear that you don't need or want anything from me except what I can give you materially." "That's not fair. I was under pressure from Robert's family. You know how they are." "No, I don't know how they are because you deliberately kept me away from them. You're an adult, Bethany. You made choices. Now I'm making mine." She stared at me, a calculating look replacing the anger. "You know, Aunt Charlotte, I could contest this. I could claim you're not of sound mind, that you've been acting erratically. After all, selling your home of 40 years suddenly, taking off to travel at your age, I am your closest relative. A judge might very well grant me conservatorship." The threat hung in the air between us, ugly and revealing. I felt a strange calm settle over me. "You could try," I agreed, "but you'd fail. James has meticulous records of my mental state, my decision-making process, and the timeline of this sale, which began 6 months ago. Additionally, I've had a full cognitive assessment done recently, specifically to prevent such a challenge. But most importantly, if you pursue this, everything will come out in court. Including how you introduced me at your rehearsal dinner. How do you think Robert's status-conscious family would react to that story making the local news?" Her face paled. She knew as well as I did that the blue-blooded family she had married into valued public image above almost everything else. "You wouldn't," she whispered. "I would hope not to," I replied honestly. "Despite everything, I don't want to hurt you, Bethany. I just want to live my life with the dignity and respect I deserve. The same dignity and respect I always showed you." She stood abruptly, grabbing her designer purse. "This isn't over." "It is for me," I said, walking to the front door and opening it. "I wish you happiness in your new life, Bethany. I truly do, but I won't be part of it under these conditions." As she stormed out to her luxury car, I felt an unexpected sense of peace wash over me. For 18 years, every decision I had made had been with Bethany's best interests at heart. For the first time since my sister died, I was free to prioritize myself. 3 days later, I boarded a plane to Rome with nothing but a carefully packed suitcase and a journal to record my experiences. I had arranged for the house to be cleared out in my absence, with my few precious keepsakes put into storage and the rest donated to charity. I did receive one more text from Bethany the day I left. "I hope you're satisfied with destroying our family. Don't expect to be part of my children's lives." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Over the following months, as I walked the streets of Rome, Florence, and Venice, I felt myself coming back to life. I visited museums I had only read about in books, ate meals that made me close my eyes in pleasure, and even had a brief romance with a charming Italian widower who owned a small vineyard outside of Tuscany. I began to recognize myself again, not as Bethany's aunt or Patricia's sister, or even as Miss Davis, the English teacher, but simply as Charlotte, a woman with her own desires, dreams, and dignity. The scholarship fund I established, the Patricia and Michael Reynolds Memorial Scholarship for Orphaned Youth, has helped 12 students so far. Each one reminds me a little of Bethany, facing the world without parents, needing someone to believe in them. The difference is that these young people express gratitude for the opportunities they're given. I've settled now in a beautiful cottage near the coast, where I volunteer at the local library and host a book club for women over 50. My life is quieter than during the years I raised Bethany, but it's fulfilling in ways I never expected. I hear about Bethany occasionally through mutual acquaintances. She and Robert had their first child last year, a daughter. I sent an anonymous gift through my lawyer, a first edition of Little Women, which had been Bethany's favorite book as a girl. I received no acknowledgement, which didn't surprise me. Sometimes at night, I look through old photo albums and remember the good years teaching Bethany to ride a bike, baking cookies together on rainy afternoons, helping her prepare for her first debate competition. I cherish those memories, even as I accept that the relationship that created them is gone. The most painful lessons in life often come from those we love most deeply. Bethany taught me that sacrifice doesn't guarantee gratitude, that love can sometimes be one-sided, and that at 62, it's not too late to begin again. Being introduced as the maid that night was humiliating, but in a strange way, it was also liberating. It showed me exactly where I stood in Bethany's new life and freed me to create one of my own. I raised my niece like she was my own daughter, only to be introduced as the maid, but in losing her, I finally found myself. If you enjoyed my story, please don't forget to like, subscribe to my channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss my new life stories. Your support means everything to me and helps me continue sharing these real experiences. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.